Welcome back to the Nullified Take channel on YouTube, where I've got the TNT takes for you. I'm your host, Chris, and we're back with top 5 takes, baby. That's right, Survivor 45 has returned, and so have I, to break down the 5 things that stood out for me immediately after the episode. Now, this is going to be a very short version of my thoughts. If you want to have a more in-depth analysis, make sure that you check out our live podcast later on this week. We will also have a special guest for a pre-recorded podcast to talk about all the action from this latest episode. But without further ado, let's get into my top 5 takes. Takeaway number 1, we've got to address the 90-minute episode. 90 minutes for what at the end of the day? Because we had someone quit in record time on Survivor for the very first time at the very first Tribal Council. Someone could not stand the heat and they had to get out of the kitchen, and that person was Hannah. She came into this season bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and left being destroyed, saying that she respects everybody that has come before her and that it is so much harder to play this game than what you can imagine sitting on your couch doing it. I've got a big problem with a show that have gone for 40 plus seasons that can't get their vetting process right. Now, I know human nature is hard to predict, and sometimes when you go out there, things are going to happen that maybe people couldn't predict. And maybe Hannah was just that great of an actress throughout all of the casting process, or doing all the psych stuff that they do before they go out there, and she had everybody fooled. But as soon as food was taken away and comfort was taken away, she couldn't cope. Not only did we have Hannah this episode wanting to quit, but we also almost had Brandon quitting as well. So really, it feels to me like the casting needs to tighten up in regards to putting people on the show, and that they have to look at people who are actually endured things in life and maybe are a little bit more resilient, because some of these people that they've casted in this season, they're coming into this pretty soft. And if you had to compare this to old school Survivor, which us old school fans are always going to do, it seems like the level of competitor just isn't there. Even when it comes to the challenges, some of these new school people are really struggling. And if you're comparing it to some of the international brands that are out there, man, they are lacking. So I have to call it out. The casting has to be tighter. The Yellow Tribe now, with Hannah quitting, is left in an absolute mess because they've got Emily and Brandon on their tribes. That means that the likes of a Caleb, a Sean, and a Sabia, by the way, love those three. All three of them popped on the screen for me this week. They're all now going to be dragged down by Emily and Brandon unless those two can get their act together. I've got higher hopes for Brandon than what I do for Emily, and we will talk about that in our next takeaway. The next takeaway for me is, and hear me out on this because we're all big fans of Survivor. Obviously, I'm a big fan. I wouldn't be doing this if I wasn't a massive fan of the show. And this affects people like myself as well when I say this. But it has the era of casting superfans past us now on Survivor. Because it seems like every single season we're getting bigger and bigger fans play the game. And a lot of them don't know what they're letting themselves into. Brandon coming into this season on the marooning, on the ship, immediately cries, this moment is too big for them. And going into the challenge, he struggles trying to get back up onto the boat. He completely loses his energy. Hats off to Sean for somehow getting him up there, because Sean, I wasn't sure if he was physically going to be capable to get Brandon up on that boat. But Brandon ends up passing out. He has too much. The moment is too big for him. And you could clearly see throughout this episode that anxiety is really getting to him. And I'm a sucker for a great story. So even though I'm being harsh on Brandon here, if he can turn it around and he suddenly becomes like a really good player at this game, it's not like it's unheard of for people to go through a tough time on the show and then sort of have a comeback from it as well. So we could definitely still see that. I mean, one of my favorite winners in Chris Daughtry struggled in the very first challenge that they had, and he came back to win that whole season. Spoiler for those that have not watched Vanuatu. So people can have a rough start and they can still get themselves back in the game, but it wasn't a good look for the average superfan out there to see Brandon go out there and really struggle to compete and to hang with these players and to hang with the game out there. The other person here that obviously is a big fan of the show as well, she compared herself a little bit to maybe like a Cass, or her friends have compared her to a Cass, which I said in the fantasy draft, that is a red flag to me if you're okay with that, because Cass, even though she was fun and entertaining to watch, clearly would have been difficult to live with out there, and Emily has proven to be difficult to live with. She immediately, on the boat, calls out Bruce, one of the most likable Survivor players ever to play the game, coming back into this game. The poor guy has not had any luck in this game, right? First season, goes out there, immediately hits his head, has a concussion, gets pulled from the game. Second season, he comes up and he's suddenly this mastermind great player that is coming back to play the game, and he's got such a big leg up on all of the other players that are out there, which to me was laughable for her to even call him out as such, because he doesn't even remember his time on the show. He remembers being on the mat, hitting his head, and that is about as much as he remembers from his time out there. He doesn't even remember camp life. So what experience does this guy really have over Emily and the likes of the others out there? I don't think any. But she calls him out. She says that, he's gone through the process. He's got some sort of experience. People are already gravitating towards him. And I do agree somewhat that he probably has a little bit of star power coming in, because a lot of people gave him a massive applause when he came in to play the game, which, for me as well, I even said to him on Twitter, you just going back there and playing the game. In my mind, you've already won, because a lot of people, when they fail, they don't necessarily get up and try and get back onto the horse. And he's got him back in the saddle here. So I applaud Bruce for that. But Emily, she called out a champion this week. I saw the article, Emily, out there on Cinema Blend, where you said that Gabler winning made you so upset that you had to put your application in and you had to go and play the game, because how did Gabler win? Well, I kind of think that, if you're going to call out a champion, if you're going to call out someone who's actually been there and done it, you better bring your A game and show that you're that much better. And to me, it clearly showed that you don't have the social skills. You don't have the social reads to see how people are taking your sort of hints and your strategy on board. Like, you're not picking up on the social cues, which explains to me why you didn't understand the Gabler win, because Gabler won with his social game. I don't stand for the hatred that he gets, because I feel like people don't understand the social game that he played, the strategy that he played, perfectly being in the middle, perfectly waiting for his chance to pounce in the game. But it's that subtleties in his social game and why people liked him is why they voted for him at the end, because they liked him more than the other two people that were sitting next to him at the end. And that is something, Emily, that it doesn't look like you understand, because we could see there was some gaping holes here in this game from you as well. Again, jury's still out on you, Emily. You could still prove me wrong coming into this next episode. You could be doing extremely well, but you're not doing yourself any favors. And if Hannah didn't quit here, you would have struggled. So seeing super fans like Emily and Brandon really struggle here this episode, it kind of makes me long for the days of having big characters that were recruited in the game, such as a coach, such as a Philip Shepherd, people like that, which it's a lot more fun to watch them. They're necessarily overly game body type of players. But I do think that there are some hope with some really good characters in this season. There's a few people that really pop for me on the screen. I will just call it out. Love Sifu, even though I know he's probably in trouble because he's too obvious with what he's doing. Austin seems to be like a lot of fun. We've got the likes of a Sabia, who I'm a big fan of. I love Caleb so far this season. So there's a few people that are already popping and already comes to mind when it comes to like really good players. And you probably always have to have people out there that's going to crash and burn as well. Going into takeaway number 3, Sweat and Savvy is back, but this time with a slight twist. We see Sweat and Savvy, and in this episode, both tribes that lose have to select 2 people to go to an island to compete for the extra supplies. Now, seeing this head-to-head was quite intriguing, because we knew that for the first time ever, one tribe would not go back with something, with no reward. And Emily's doing the most back at Yellow to paint this big picture on both Caleb and Sabia, because, they put their necks on the line. They dared to risk going out there to try and get the supplies for the camp. They must be out there to try and get an advantage, which, fair enough, these days, chances are that there is some sort of an advantage out anywhere, and if you're not there to supervise your tribe mates, they can get something that you're not aware of. So I get that angle that she's coming at. But the problem is, she doesn't even know these people that she's with in camp, and she is like already trying to strategize with them, not having any feel for how strategic they are, what their personalities is like, not talking about like, hey, what do you do at home? Clearly she doesn't do small talk. Before she's try and build, before you go and strategize, you've got to build the social relationships first and get some social capital before people are going to move with you. There's this famous saying out there, and I can't remember who said it. People don't care about how much you know, they care about how much you care. about their situation and who they are and how you're going to help them build those connections. But going through this, you had Sabiyah and Caleb both power the way through, carrying the logs. Sabiyah, very impressive here, pushing Caleb on, and then Brandon and Jake also hung in there. But at the end of the day, the savvy part of trying to get this bag with a flint untangled from the obstacle that they had to move it through, that seemed to be too much for both of these tribes. So for the very first time in the history of the show, we see two tribes not get their reward, which later on in the episode, when they get to the immunity, is kind of like null and void, because Jeff said, even though you guys didn't win it, you automatically after this immunity you're gonna have your reward back at home, or your camp supplies back at home, or something like that, which was strange to me, because why did we do Sweat and Savvy to begin with if we're gonna just give it to them? So only the tribe who lost actually lost their flint. So very bizarre. It seemed like something there wasn't well thought through, but overall, I like the fact that they changed it slightly, even though they haven't moved away from Sweat and Savvy. They haven't moved away from making the game more interesting for me when it comes to the start of this show, because it's still very similar to previous seasons since season 41. They're trying something here, so I will give them a solid 7 out of 10 for this change of Sweat and Savvy. Moving into takeaway number 4, Bruce. We're going to have to talk about Bruce because he's the only returning player, if you can even call him a returning player. And I have to say, I would give him a solid 50-50 mark at the moment for his performance in this first episode. There were always going to be questions about a player coming back in the show, and obviously Emily brought a lot of heat to him in the opening exchanges there on the boat, and he deflected a lot of it really well. Like Sifu would have been proud with his mental and verbal Tai Chi that he was sort of doing out there, and he was deflecting a lot of it by saying, I haven't really played the game that much, I don't really know much more than what you guys know, so I feel like he did pretty well there, and most people accepted it, and it looked like he had, like I said, a superstar type of welcoming by everybody. Everybody seemed accepting of him except for Emily. He gets back to the beach, all is well, goes to the Blue Tribe, he's there with the 3 girls, Kendra, Kelly, and Katurah, and he says to them, listen, I'm not going to be like your dad, or I'm not a dad, I'm not going to be the leader at the camp, I'm just going to be like crazy old uncle here, and I'm going to have chill vibes, which sounds like someone outside of the game told him that's the angle you need to take. You don't want to be the dad, you don't want to be the leader, you don't want to be the Roxroy, but he then still finds it really hard not to give advice, because clearly these girls are all a lot younger than him. He probably does see them more as like nieces or like daughters or something like that, and he does want to give them advice in regards to how to do things, which clearly does annoy some of the girls out there. So I am a little bit worried for him. The next on Survivor looks great with him getting a lot of great confessionals. He's a part of my draft team, and I'm hoping that from a character standpoint, he's going to bring me a lot of points with that. But I am a little bit worried for Bruce in the long term. Even though I'm having fun seeing him back there at this stage, it's 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards when it comes to his game. So we're going to have to keep an eye on the Bruce watch out there, and hopefully he does do well moving forward in the game. Takeaway number 5. So who are the alliances that are forming out there? Currently, we've got a couple of alliances that are sort of clear to us on the TV show. We've got Caleb and Sabiyah, which is being called out by Emily immediately, even when they go to tribal council here. And they both kind of need to work together as the 2 strongest physical people in that tribe. And I think probably even mental, they're up there. But, they are forced to work together within this tribe. And I'm not sure where Sean's sitting. He seems to kind of be working with them. And then Brandon now being in the outs, I could easily see him going to where there is power. And you want that certainty. I don't know if he can work with Emily moving forward, because Emily seems difficult just to live with. To begin with, like they said, you're either a glass half full or a glass half empty person, and she seems to be glass half empty. And it's going to be interesting moving forward in the game to see if Caleb and Sabiyah can continue to go on, because I feel like that there's 2 good players within these 2 players. But they're in such a bad spot with this tribe that they really need to win 1 or 2, because I can easily see them go into a position where they lose a couple of challenges in a row here, and then going in with a numbers deficit into a merge situation, which they want to try and avoid. So that's one alliance. The other alliance that is sort of starting to come up here, which is an alliance that I think can do some real damage this season, is the 3 Blue Tribe girls coming together, and Kendra, Kelly, and Katurah. They bond here in this episode based on the fact that they're all around the same age. They have a birthday in the same month. I believe it was September. I just watched the episode, so I can't remember. And their star signs align, which again, we get here in this position, Kelly saying, I'm not fully on the star sign vibe like Kendra, but I can play it up. I can play into that. And this is an alliance that I think can be strong. They realize that girls have been taken out very early on the last couple of seasons of Survivor. So they're going to try and potentially target one of the guys. And sadly, it looks like Jake is going to be the guy who's in trouble here. He's already told them that he's a lawyer. They see that as a threat. Katurah is very happy that she hasn't told anybody about the fact that she's also a lawyer. And she's kind of gaslighting Jake a little bit here to continue to play up the fact that he's so smart by asking him more and more questions about being a lawyer, which was quite funny to see that he's not picking up that she is pulling this out of him. So that's it for me for this episode. Those are sort of the things that stood out to me in the immediate. But like I said, we will break this episode down in more detail. What did you agree with? What did you disagree with? What are your top 5 takes here for this episode? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this kind of content, hit subscribe, hit the like, put a notification bell. And for now, catch your torches, head back to camp. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.